I don't know. I mean, it's just, I learned from a very, very, very young age by, just the way you watch and the way you see the way people treat each other that
Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen were once considered one of the loveliest couples in Hollywood. But after nearly a decade together, they quietly ended their relationship. The reason behind their unexpected split has remained hidden for almost 20 years. Until now. Recently, Valerie has come out to confirm the reason behind the end of their relationship, and it is much darker than anyone could have predicted. Why did their marriage fail? Why had Valerie found it so hard to get over Van Halen? Join us as we take a deep dive into the tragic love story of this iconic couple, the beginning of a love like no other. American actress Valerie Bertinelli was born April 23, 1960. She began acting as a child and made her screen debut in a 1974 episode of Apple's Way. Her career grew quickly and she gained wide recognition for portraying Barbara Cooper Royer on the sitcom One Day at a Time, going on to win 2 Golden Globes for Best Supporting Actress. She also starred in several television films and played the titular character in the sitcom Sydney in 1990. Valerie Bertinelli met Eddie Van Halen in 1980 when she was already a familiar face on television as Barbara Cooper in the series One Day at a Time. At the time, Valerie's career was steady, and her image was tied to the label of Hollywood's good girl. Eddie Van Halen, on the other hand, was the frontman of the rock band Van Halen, dominating the charts with hits like Jump, Panama, and a series of sold-out world tours. The two came into each other's lives from opposite worlds, one from family-friendly television, the other from the wild realm of rock music. Their first meeting took place after an interview, where Eddie was immediately drawn to Valerie's radiant presence and smile. However, Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen first officially met in 1980, when she was just 20 years old. At the time, she was staying at her parents' home in Shreveport, Louisiana, due to an actor's strike. She had backstage passes to see Van Halen perform in the area. As she recalled in a podcast interview, she saw what he looked like and thought he was cute, which led to her going to his show. The couple quickly began dating, and just a few months later, on April 11, 1981, they were officially married. The wedding was a private affair in California, but it still made waves in the entertainment world due to the stark contrast between the two. Some people found it surprising that a rocker with a wild man image like Eddie would tie the knot with a wholesome sitcom star like Valerie, but they were both smitten by each other. However, their surprisingly fast marriage was not without some objections. In a People interview following their wedding, Van Halen admitted that he didn't think the other guys liked the fact that he got married too much, but he loved it. At the time, he referred to marrying Valerie as the best thing he had ever done. A sentiment Bertinelli agreed with, saying, "Even when I feel sad now, I've never felt more fulfilled. It's crazy. I never thought anything could be this wonderful. Everything, good or bad, is euphoric." Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen continued to show how in love they were with one another, becoming one of the it couples of the 80s. They showed up to countless events in style. Husband and wife both rocked some seriously fabulous big 80s hair. But as their relationship grew, tragedy brewed in the background. At that time, Eddie had just completed the album Fair Warning, one of Van Halen's most intense works. While Valerie continued her weekly appearances on national television, their demanding work schedules left little time for one another. But Valerie often accompanied Eddie on tour, striving to reconcile the chaotic rock lifestyle with traditional married life. Van Halen was one of the biggest rock bands of the 80s, with wildly catchy songs like Jump and many more. Eddie was known for his lightning-fast, party-starting guitar riffs, and was widely regarded as a true virtuoso of the instrument. In 1985, the original lineup of the iconic band broke up, with many of the members leaving the band. While Bertinelli and Van Halen had a happy marriage, when tensions arose within the band, people were quick to blame her for Van Halen's breakup. The situation was not unlike people blaming Yoko Ono for the breakup of the Beatles. The public opinions became so worrying that Valerie had to speak up for herself. She defended herself, saying that though she had been accused of that, she did not think Yoko Ono broke up the Beatles, and that she herself certainly did not break up Van Halen. Bertinelli recalled that her relationship with Van Halen's lead singer, David Lee Roth, was often rocky, and claimed that he stopped allowing any of the band members' girlfriends or wives on tour. In 1985, Roth left Van Halen and was replaced by Sammy Hagar. Eddie stayed in the group and was a core member until his death. The breakup of the members of Eddie's band was one of the first trials of their relationship, but it was certainly not the last one. The birth of Wolfgang Van Halen and the end of their marriage. In 1991, Valerie and Eddie welcomed their first and only child, Wolfgang. Valerie had always wanted to be a mom. 10 years earlier, in 1981, she had told People magazine that she was looking forward to having kids and that Eddie wanted to be a father very much. Yet the couple had to wait a couple of years because Van Halen was often away on tour and Valerie still had a year left on her television series. Valerie had added that she did not want to be a part-time parent. True to her words, after the birth of their child, Valerie stepped back from long-term projects, prioritized time with her son, and tried to balance the roles of mother, wife, and public figure. Valerie and Eddie were devoted parents who encouraged their son's musical talents, especially Valerie, who did her best to give Wolfgang a normal childhood free from the media. In fact, the year Wolfgang was born, Van Halen released an instrumental track, 316. The song was meant as a tribute to the musician's son. The couple appeared to have fully settled into their role as parents. But behind the loved-up pictures and grand gestures, something shocking was happening. Although Valerie had stepped away from the spotlight in order to care for their child, Eddie did not follow suit. For Valerie, raising a child while her husband maintained the life of a high-profile rocker was no easy task. Valerie once described this period as living two lives under one roof. Eddie continued his erratic lifestyle, often missing important family moments, while Valerie struggled alone to hold everything together. Throughout the 1990s, the effort to preserve their home life persisted. Valerie didn't leave Eddie even as he began to face serious health issues. They never publicly discussed their difficulties and continued to appear together at major events as a normal family. Behind the scenes, though, their relationship had already begun to fracture. This continued until Valerie decided she could no longer take the absence of her husband. Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen separated in 2001, following 20 years of marriage. She filed for divorce in 2005, and their split was finalized in 2007. Neither of them gave a public reason for their divorce, choosing instead to end their marriage without drama. Valerie moved on with her life. She continued working in television, published cookbooks, and raised her son in what she considered the most stable environment possible. Eddie remained in the shadows, dealing with health problems and a career that was no longer at its peak. Both of them later remarried. Van Halen married stuntwoman and actress Janie Lisewski in 2009, and Bartinelli married financial planner Tom Vitale in 2007-2011. Bertinelli and Vitale divorced in 2021. Through all this, Bertinelli and Van Halen remained friendly and even attended each other's second weddings. At the time, no one could have predicted that nearly 2 decades later, it would be Valerie who would reopen the door to the past and reveal the true reason she could no longer remain in that marriage. Although there had been many speculations, Valerie's revelation still shocked many, answering questions that had been on the minds of many. The revelation: a dangerous habit. After many years of silence, Valerie Bertinelli finally revealed the complexities of her marriage with Eddie Van Halen. The secrets were revealed in 2008 through her first memoir, Losing It.
I wrote about it in the book because I just thought it was something that people needed to hear, that no matter what you go through, you can always find your way back to love.
She mentioned for the first time what truly happened behind closed doors. According to Valerie, Eddie was addicted to cocaine for most of their time together. The rock star drank daily as a habit and would often spiral out of control. Valerie never denied the love she had for her husband, but she admitted that he gradually became someone living with the addiction, no longer a true life partner. Eddie's addiction was already worrying, but unfortunately, he didn't stop there. Eddie did nothing to help his condition, instead leaning into his bad habits. A particularly striking detail was Eddie's refusal to quit smoking, even after being diagnosed with mouth cancer. Valerie revealed that he had 1/3 of his tongue surgically removed, but still continued to smoke and consume hard liquor against the advice of medical professionals. She described it as a journey of slow self-destruction. She loved his soul, she revealed, but she hated his alcohol and drugs. Not him. Moreover, the pain didn't come only from addiction. Valerie admitted to having an affair during a fractured phase in their marriage. The reason, according to her, was the prolonged feeling of abandonment. She wrote in Losing It that she had just wanted to be loved and cared for by her loved ones, and due to the addiction Eddie suffered, she couldn't find that in her own home. Shockingly, the addiction was only one of their problems. Eddie also had affairs with different women, especially while he was on tour. But he wasn't alone. Valerie admitted to also having an affair.
Valerie admits she cheated on Eddie, used drugs, and battled a lifelong struggle with weight.
There's a reason some of us get fat, and it has nothing to do with eating too much. It's about the comfort that food brings us. I mean, food basically is my drug of choice. I was never into anything else as much as I was into food.
Both of them lived in silent opposition, neither speaking fully about it, but also no longer able to hold on. Although Valerie had shouldered everything with strength, it continued to have terrible effects on her mental health. Eventually, the worst happened. In the early 2000s, Valerie's mental state collapsed from the constant stress. She developed an eating disorder, gained weight uncontrollably, and gradually withdrew from public appearances. In a later interview with Oprah, she admitted that after the separation, she spent most of her time at home, avoiding friends and relatives, focusing solely on raising her son. She lost control inside and out. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. For her, it was the end of the illusion that love could save someone. In 2022, through her second memoir, Enough Already, Valerie expanded her perspective. By then, she had regained clarity after years of therapy and sobriety. What she wrote no longer carried a defensive tone, but a tone of complete acceptance. She referred to her marriage with Eddie as beautiful, but troubled, saying they came together too young, too unprepared, and without the tools to handle fame, addiction, and isolation overcame their love for each other. She also admitted that she tried to play the role of a strong wife, but it was only a facade to avoid being judged. In 2024, after watching the Behind the Music documentary by Wolfgang Van Halen, their son, Valerie, posted a video that drew widespread attention on Instagram. In it, she clearly stated for the first time that she had accepted that Eddie was not her soulmate, as she once believed. She went on to say that she was in love with an idealized version of him. Valerie revealed that she had been so involved that after his death, she was ready to play the grieving widow. But the truth is, they hadn't been a couple for 20 years. The documentary had been a hard watch for Valerie, who said that watching her son's pain made her realize that staying silent was no longer the right choice for her. Her shocking statements sparked intense public debate. Some praised Valerie for her courage to speak the truth, especially as addiction remains a taboo-like topic in the entertainment world. Others argued that revisiting the past of someone who has passed away could tarnish the legendary image Eddie left behind. Valerie didn't push back. Instead, she emphasized that she was not sharing the truth to diminish anyone. Instead, she was sharing it so people who find themselves in the same situation would not have to stay silent. Through her mournful yet detached sentiments, Valerie turned her story from a high-profile divorce into a testimony for those who have lived in the shadows of damaging relationships. Still, one aspect that can easily be misunderstood is that her account might lead the public to believe there was no harmony in their marriage, when in reality, they maintained a connection even after everything had ended. What was Valerie's relationship with Eddie like after the end of their decades-long marriage? Stay with us to find out. An unbreakable bond and friendship after divorce. Despite being unable to make their union work, Eddie and Valerie shared a seemingly unbreakable bond. Although the marriage between Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen officially ended in 2007, they remained in contact and maintained a certain level of respect, particularly for their son, Wolfgang, whom both considered the center of their lives. There were no lawsuits after the divorce, no public disputes over property, and everything was handled amicably. Their relationship quietly continued in a different form. No longer husband and wife, but never truly estranged. Their friendship grew stronger, especially as they had to be present in their son's life. At Wolfgang's major events, Valerie and Eddie still appeared together, fully fulfilling their roles as parents. Wolfgang joined Van Halen as the bassist in 2006, replacing Michael Anthony. The decision sparked debate among fans, but both Eddie and Valerie gave their full support. Valerie once shared, "Even though we're no longer a traditional family, we're still a team for Wolfie." However, while Eddie Van Halen seemed to be doing fine on the surface, the unexpected would soon happen. In 2019, the consequences of his erratic lifestyle seemingly caught up with him. Eddie developed a deadly cancer of the throat, which put him in the hospital. When Eddie began battling severe complications from throat cancer in 2019, Valerie was among those frequently visiting the hospital. They undoubtedly shared a great bond, one that grew closer as his cancer spread and Eddie faced death. Valerie went in to reveal something, an act from Eddie which only showed how deep their affection for each other was. On Thanksgiving Day 2019, he came by her home and asked her to speak privately. Once they found a quiet spot in a friend's car, he handed her a small bag with a pendant-sized gold bar that he bought while getting cancer treatments in Germany. Eddie apologized with tears in his eyes, telling her he was sorry and that he hoped it wasn't weird that he got her a gift instead of getting one for his wife. "He wants me to know he messed up during our marriage," Valerie added. "I contributed to our troubles too, and I am also sorry." Their exchange, made almost at the very end of Eddie's life, showed how deeply they had once loved each other. In the final weeks of his life, Valerie and Wolfgang spent every day in the hospital, where Eddie was surrounded by his loved ones, including his second wife, Janie Lisewski, and his brother, Alex Van Halen. They were also there with him in the final moments. After his death, Valerie revealed in her memoir that she still has regrets about how she sometimes held herself back from getting too close to her former husband when he was so sick. They were both married at the time, she to her second husband, financial planner Tom Vitale, and Eddie to Janie Lisewski. Accepting that he was gone, Bertinelli acknowledged the fact that the complexity and depth of their relationship may be hard for others to understand. Her memoir sparked rumors, with many claiming that she had divorced her husband, Tom Vitale, because of her lingering affection for Eddie. But Valerie was quick to debunk the tabloids. She described their love as the greatest love of all time, saying that she could never explain exactly how she felt so deeply towards him. Their close bond, however, was not a factor in her decision to file for separation from Vitale in late November. In order to kill the rumors, Valerie spoke up, revealing that the reason her marriage with Tom Vitale ended was because they had become very unkind to each other and eventually grew apart. She added for good measure that her decision to leave had nothing to do with Eddie, as she had avoided opening up to him about her lingering feelings until he sadly passed away, as she didn't want to reopen that chapter of her life. In addition to her love for Eddie, Bertinelli also writes about how the loss has taught her to live more in the moment and to stop judging herself and her weight so harshly, something she has struggled with since her teens. The book is more vulnerable than anything else I've ever written, says Bartinelli, who is now hosting the 11th season of Kids Baking Championship.
I mean, I see more insane people in the TV world than I have in his world. I mean, you know, because I'd never lived with anyone, and I didn't want to because I didn't know if it was worth it.
Still, she hopes her memoir will help others who sometimes see themselves in her struggles. As she says, sharing makes people feel less alone. What do you think of Eddie Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli's tragic love story? Do you think Valerie made the right decision by leaving? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.